break, guys. I hope you are still enjoying the show. If you've just joined us, we are doing your final exam prep to help you with the upcoming exams. If you're someone who's constantly running out of data, then this next competition is just for you. Wazo Matrix is bringing you the hashtag Wazo Winner competition, where 2 lucky matriculants stand a chance to win 2 gigs of data. So please head on over to our Facebook page and enter the competition. Thank you so much, Hayley, and over to you.
Thanks, Looney. Welcome back, Matrix. I hope that you've all interacted with that question that we had on the app and that you've put in your answer. We will discuss it at the end of the show. Let's move on to the next question that we have, also coming from the September paper. So now we've got Andile runs a travel agency and deals in tour packages. A mathematical literacy student drew up an income and expense graph that's shown below to help Andile determine the break-even point for his business. And they give you the formula. So the formula used for expenses and income. Expenses is 2,000 Rand plus 500 times the number of tour packages. And the income is 1,000 Rand times the number of tour packages. So let's go analyze our graph. So whenever you get a graph, even before you actually read the question, just look at the graph, see what information you can get, and you'll probably guess at some of the questions they're going to ask you. So when looking at this graph, we can always see from our heading what it is, and we were told it's the income and expense graph for the tour business. We've got our income and expense in Rand on this axis, okay, going up in thousands. We've got the number of tour packages on this axis, and that's going up in 2s. And then we can see we've got 2 different graphs. So we've got our income graph, starts at 0, ends at like 9,000, and our expenses starts at 2,000 and ends somewhere at about 6,500. So that's analyzing the graph. We can see that this is the point of break even. I'm sure they're going to ask us that. So first question was, determine the number of tour packages at the break-even point. So let's go back to that graph. I told you they're going to ask us this question. Okay, so we're looking at this. They want to know the number of packages. So it's important that we go from the graph where it breaks even. That's where the 2 graphs are equal. Break even, your income is equal to your expenses. You're going to draw a line going down to the axis, and you're going to read the value there. So the number is 4. Let's go fill that number in. So the number is 4. But I just want to add here, the break even is actually where your income equals your expense. Just so that we remember. Then we're going to go on to the next question. Our graph again. Determine the income if 8 tour packages are sold. Now I'm going to go back not to the graph, I'm actually going to do this calculation, and then I'm going to check it on the graph. So my formula that I had was income was 1,000 Rand times the number of packages. And I'm going to just substitute in the values into that equation. So my income is 1,000 Rand times by, they wanted 8 tours, so my answer is 8,000 Rand. Now I'm going to go to my graph and I'm going to double check that I actually have this correct. So now I'm going from my graph up to the graph, remember it's the income graph, and then I'm going to go across, missing a line somewhere there, and I see that it's 8,000. So I've got my answer correct and I've done the calculations. The next part says the income received is VAT exclusive. Determine the VAT amount payable if 6 tour packages are sold. And of course we use VAT at 15%. Now whenever you have a VAT question, it's really important for you to actually ask yourself, what are they asking me? So they can ask you for the VAT inclusive amount, they can ask you for the VAT exclusive amount, or they can ask you for the actual VAT amount. So remember the 3 distinctions. So this, they are giving us the income and they are asking us to determine the VAT amount. So we're first going to work out our income for 6 tours. So that was 1,000 Rand times that by 6, which gives me the 6,000 Rand income. And remember, that was excluding VAT. So now I want to know what it is including. So I'm now going to take my 6,000 Rand and I'm going to times that by 15%. And I'm going to get my calculator out. So 6,000, again, double check that you've got the correct numbers in, times 15 and my percent, and I get 900 Rand. So my answer to that is 900 Rand. I'm just going to go back and double check the question. So determine the VAT amount payable on 6 tour packages are sold. So I know that now that I've answered the question correctly. I've just given them the VAT amount. Okay, moving on to our next question. Calculate the profit. So this they want the profit made from 6 tours, and we're going to use the formula income minus expenses minus the VAT payable. And we're dealing with our 6 tours, so my VAT payable I already know is 900 Rand. Okay, my income was 6,000 Rand. So I'm going to 6,000 Rand. My expenses, I hadn't worked out my expenses yet. So what I'm going to do underneath this, I'm going to work out my expenses. I'm going to do it with a formula and then I'm going to show it to you on the graph. So the formula for my expenses was 2,000 Rand, let's just write in the expenses, was 2,000 Rand plus 500 Rand times the number of packages. So in this case, it was 2,000 Rand times 500. I'm going to put this in brackets, actually times by the, not 9, 6. I don't know where 9 came from. Okay, that number is 6. So let's get a calculator out. So on our calculator, it was 2,000. And make sure to type it exactly the way that you've said it. And please, I'm going to show you this on this calculator, times 6. And that gives you 5,000 Rand. I'm coming back to this question. So that was 5,000 Rand. Coming back to the calculator. So we're going 5,000 Rand there, and we're minusing our 900. What I just want to point out on the calculator, I'm using a scientific calculator on the board. But it's important that Maths Lit you can use with any calculator. So your 4-function calculator is fine. But if you are using a different calculator, it's important that you're actually comfortable with the calculator that you're using. So if I was doing this calculation on a calculator that wasn't scientific, I would actually have to multiply first my 500 times my 6, get an answer, and then add my 2,000 Rand. Just so press equals in between little things that you want to do. It'll just make it easier, and hopefully you won't get a calculation error because of the tools that you're using. Right, let's go back to our question. So now I've got my calculator out. So I'm now taking my 6,000 Rand, which was my income. Okay, and I'm minusing, not 500, 5,000. I will change the board now, and minusing 900, and I get an answer of 100 Rand. So this is, that needed another 0, and my answer to this was 100 Rand. Remember it, money has to have a Rand in front of it. If it's a whole number like this, you don't need to put your 2 decimal places. But if there was a decimal at all, must be 2 decimal places. Have I answered the question? It says calculate the profit made from 6 tours. I have. I'd like to show that to you on the graph though. So if I take a colored pen, let's do red, and I look at 6 packages, okay, I can see that that was my 5,000, then that was my 6,000, and the difference here was my 1,000, I'm just going to write it in here, and from that I needed to minus my VAT, and that's where I get my 100 Rand. So from both doing the calculations and using the graph, I've got the same answer. And that's always a good idea. If you can do something more than one way, then do that so you actually know that you've got the correct answer. Moving on, it says determine the number of tour packages that were sold if the expenses are 1,500 Rand more than the income. Now, once again, there's more than one way of doing this, but I'm going to go to my graph and I'm going to show you, I'm looking for somewhere where the expenses are more than the income, and I can see that it needs to be less than 4. So it has to be somewhere over here. So now I'm looking, that's not 1,500, that's only 1,000, so it must be this one. So it probably is 1, and now, so I'm going to look at that, sorry, wrong way. I'm going to look at that answer. So my question is probably 1 tour. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to test it out and see what my answers are. So I'm going to do my income. Okay, let's do my income is 1 times 1,000, or 1,000 times 1, which is 1,000. And my expenses, let's do that in a different color. My expenses were 2,000 plus 500 times 1, which gives me 2,500. And now if I minus these two, and I want my expenses higher, 2,500 minus your 1,000, and I get my 1,500. And that is what the question asked for, 1,500 more. Right, that was our graph. Let's move on to another question. So we now have John works for a company that makes bricks. He's paid a gross salary of 12,500 Rand per month. So gross salary, you've got to look out for these words and remember it. This is what the company pays him. It's not what he gets in his bank account. That is called your net salary. So this is before deductions or anything. It's what the company pays him. John and his employer contribute, so we've got John and his employer contribute 1% each towards UIF every month. And we've got our questions. Let's do each question separately. So it says, what does the acronym UIF stand for? These are one of the things that you need to know, that UIF is Unemployment Insurance Fund. Okay, it's important that you know some of these acronyms. The second part of the question says calculate the total UIF contribution by both employee and employer for the period of 1 year. So there's a couple of key characters that we need there, key information. So both employee and employer, period of 1 year, and the total. So I'm going to find some space. He was earning, his gross salary was 12,500. They told us that UIF was 1% each. So I'm first going to do that calculation. So on my calculator, I'm going to say my 12,500 times 1% is 125 Rand. So that is what he is paying. His employer is paying as well, so we can actually times that by 2. Now, I often use my calculator, even when it's calculations that I know I can do in my head, just because I sometimes get nervous and then I might forget. So it's 250 Rand. But the question then said, for the year, this is per month. So I need to remember that it said per year, so I'm going to take that and times by 12. And on my calculator, I've got this 250 times that by 12, and I get an answer of 3,000 Rand. And then I'm just going to go back to the question quickly to just check, have I actually answered the question. So we've got the total paid by both of them. We've done the employer, we've done the employee, and we've done a period of 1 year. So I should get all 3 of those marks. So on that note, I think it might be time for us to take a little bit of a breather. So I'm going to hand you over to Luni.
Thank you, Hayley. Guys, please don't forget to send us your questions and comments through on WhatsApp as well as our social media pages. Search for Wozometrics and we'll assist you as best as we can. But for now, let's take a quick break and we'll see you straight after this.